And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, if this string cutter was dull enough and fully charged, could I use it to shave my back hair? And with everyone going maskless and carefree for this Mother's Day, will I finally be able to give my mom the gift of COVID? And now, the podcast host who avoids COVID-19 like he's Captain Picard dodging a laser beam, Pete Dominic!
Yes, that's right, Pete Co. I am still talking it one day at a time. Live each one like it's your last, not knowing whether or not you're going to get COVID. My parents are doing much better. Thank you to everybody who reached out, who heard them on the Friday podcast. Very kind. What a very kind community that you are of people and amazing folks. Thank you. Thank you for signing up to subscribe to this podcast. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Let's do it. StandUpWithPete.com. Today, if you haven't already, you can also always edit your subscription up if you want to. It's a good way to start the week for me. And I've got a great show for you today. Joining me today, JL Cauvin, hilarious stand-up comedian, the best Trump impressionist, and an awesome analyst of politics and life. I always love talking to him. We don't see everything certainly the same way, and I think it's always a great conversation, always fun and hilarious, too. Today, no exception. And for the first time, because Jeff Jarvis told me to, and Jeff is, of course, a media critic and a professor at a journalism school here in New York at the New School, the Craig Newmark School for Journalism. He had been talking incessantly or a lot about the work of Juliet Jeske, who's a grad student of his doing a really important project that is called Decoding Fox News. She watches Fox News and other right-wing media outlets, so you don't have to. Juliet Jeske joins me today. She's a really fun, interesting, brilliant person, and I was very excited to have her on the show for the first time. So, JL Cauvin, Juliet Jeske, and you, lots to get to from the news. After all, it is Monday, a weekend of news, and I'm going to bring it to you as I do every Monday through Thursday right here on Stand Up. It's time for your news dump, the last 24. All right, well, here are a few headlines from over the weekend, starting with Friday, where the job numbers came out for April. The U.S. economy added 428,000 jobs in April. Also on Friday, I went to see Doctor Strange with Ava, and it came up with the biggest opening of 2022. The Marvel Cinema Universe refuses to fail. On Saturday night, a horse won a horse race in Kentucky. Rich Strike is the name of the horse that won the Kentucky Derby, beating 80-1 odds to pull off the biggest upset since 1913. So if you bet on Rich Strike, you might have gotten rich. At least 32 people are dead, 19 are still missing after a Havana, Cuba hotel explosion, according to the Red Cross. Muslim women in Afghanistan must now wear head-to-toe coverings in public, which is horrible. Up to 60 are feared dead after Russia bombed a Ukrainian school. And the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, showed up in Ukraine over the weekend on a secret trip, met with the First Lady, and more. Lots to talk about, lots of clips to play for you. And let's start with the First Lady, Jill Biden, in Ukraine.
I thought it was important to show the Ukrainian people that this war has to stop. And this war has been brutal. And that the people of the United States stand with the people of Ukraine.
Well, let's stay with the people of Ukraine or the war in Russia and check in with the ambassador, the Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. Her name is Oksana Markarova. She's proved to be a very effective communicator, a no-nonsense, very passionate and strong woman. She was on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, where she said, amongst other things, that if Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledges the war in Ukraine during Victory Day, it will be the first time he has told the truth.
There is some speculation that Putin could officially acknowledge the country's at war and then start conscripting soldiers, which would help him build up that offensive in the east. Is that what you're expecting?
Well, that would be the first time when Putin will say the truth, that it is war and that he is in dire need of conscripting soldiers. I hope that then it will be evident to all Russians what they are doing in Ukraine. That's an aggressive war. They attacked a neighboring country, a peaceful country. And the question is, are they prepared to have more tens of thousands dying in Ukraine for no reason at all?
Here's a little bit more about the speech that Vladimir Putin is expected to make today.
President Putin is expected to make a speech tomorrow in Red Square. It's not clear exactly what he is going to announce, but the CIA director said yesterday Putin is doubling down. What exactly are you preparing for?
Well, we know that there are no red lines for the regime in Moscow, so we're preparing for everything. They said they were not going to attack us, and they did. They said that there is no war in Ukraine for the past 8 years, and we know it was. They said they didn't take the Crimea, and they did. They said they're not killing civilians, and yet we see everywhere the deaths of women, children. They torture them, they rape them, they kill them. So we can count that Putin and imperialistic Russia will do everything bad they can possibly try to do. The question is, are we all prepared, the civilized world, to do everything possible to defend our democracy and freedom? And Ukraine certainly is not only ready, but shows for the past 74 days that we bravely defend those values and defend our homes.
All right, let's go from the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion, to the war against COVID. It ain't over, folks. And yesterday on ABC's This Week, Martha Raddatz had Dr. Ashish Jha on, who is the White House COVID coordinator. And he said, we got to get ahead of this thing. We're going to have waning immunity. The virus continues to evolve. Well, I'll let him say it.
The White House is sounding the alarm about a fall and winter surge. Here to discuss is the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, Dr. Ashish Jha. Pardon my allergies there, Dr. Jha. I want to start out by talking about this possible surge. You say as many as 100 million people could be affected.
Yeah, good morning, Martha. Thanks for having me here. You know, if you take a step back and look at the last 2 winters, we've had relatively large surges of infections. We're looking at a range of models, both internal and external models, and what they're predicting is that if we don't get ahead of this thing, we're going to have a lot of waning immunity. This virus continues to evolve, and we may see a pretty sizable wave of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths this fall and winter. Whether that happens or not is largely up to us as a country. If we can prepare and if we can act, we can prevent that. But we're going to need Congress's help, and that's one of the key messages here, is we need the resources to fight that battle so we don't have that kind of a fall or winter.
All right, there he is, Dr. Ashish Jha, and again, warning that we've got to get the additional funding for COVID emergency aid.
And of course, this is coming when you're asking for an additional $22.5 billion in emergency aid, with Republicans wanting a much lower number of about $10 billion. What difference will that make?
Yeah, it's going to make an enormous difference, actually. So let's talk about what happens if we don't get this. There's a new generation of vaccines that's almost surely coming. FDA is making final decisions on that. Americans, we will not have enough of those vaccines for all Americans. We're going to run out of treatments. We're going to run out of testing. So if Congress doesn't step up and fund these, I think, urgent, emergent priorities, and they have to do it now. We can't wait till the fall. It'll be too late. If Congress does not do that now, we will go into this fall and winter with none of the capabilities that we have developed over the last 2 years.
All right. Well, I have Dr. Arthur Kaplan and I think Dr. Aaron Carroll both joining me this week for the latest on COVID. May be reaching out to Angela Rasmussen or Dr. Megan May as well to talk about where we are at on that. But now let's get to the big story all last week. It will continue into, I guess, the entire decade. I don't know. It's overturning abortion rights in the United States of America. You know what? I think Terry Moran put it pretty well. He is ABC News Senior national correspondent, I just like the way that he lays this out in pretty dramatic, stark terms on ABC's This Week yesterday.
Harry, this may be just a draft opinion, but there seems little doubt that Roe will be overturned and massive implications across
It's
America.
almost a certainty, Martha. This is a draft opinion. It's the draft opinion conservatives have been dreaming about and working toward for half a century. And sometimes votes can switch between draft opinions and the final result. But it's clear that the 5 conservative justices on this draft opinion, Thomas, Gorsuch, Alito, Barrett, and Kavanaugh, have decided to go for it and do what conservatives have been trying to do for all these years, which is overturn Roe versus Wade. And the impact is going to be incalculable on the lives of women. Women will occupy a different place in American society. We'll have 2 regimes in the country where women do have the right of bodily autonomy under the old way and can choose to have abortion, and where the process is criminalized. And that will change the country, and it's changed the court. The court has never done this. Roll back a previously granted individual constitutional right. It shows an eagerness, really, to crown a conservative political movement with a judicial triumph.
And Terry, you talk about divide. The nation is already politically divided. This divides it further.
It does, and I think the leak itself is not a great sign. It shows that, look, everybody always knew there were politics in the Supreme Court, but that tradition of secrecy, of confidentiality, of mutual trust, no matter how badly they fought, it served to take the court out of the muck and mire of our politics. And this shows that people inside the institution are willing to drag it in to our politics and use it. And I think it will damage the court's reputation, certainly worse than Bush versus Gore, which did take it down a significant notch. I think it's going to divide the country because this is an issue that we haven't stopped fighting about. And as I say, it will end up with 2 Americas for women.
Indeed it will, and really good points by Terry Moran on ABC's This Week. I also like this from the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, who I think is awesome. She said on Meet the Press to Chuck Todd that overturning Roe could have a chilling effect on women's health care.
Look, I mean, another instance, the tragedy of a miscarriage. Does this mean a doctor cannot perform the procedure that's necessary, essentially, when you've identified a miscarriage? It seems to me that some OBGYNs are going to think they are committing a crime if they essentially just do what most doctors would do right there, which is the DNC.
Yeah, I think that what's going to happen is doctors will be so afraid that there'll be investigations into these procedures, even understanding that many times those procedures are performed where there is no viability any longer. But because it's the same procedure that you might perform for an abortion, they'll be so concerned that these cases will be investigated. It will have a chilling effect, and you won't have basic medical health care that is required for women not to have extreme health problems or even die. Right. Doctors simply are not going to perform those procedures anymore because they don't want to go to prison for it.
All right, let's listen to a little bit more. This is actually the first question that Chuck Todd asked the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel.
Let me start with the decision you've already made. You said if Roe is overturned, you are not going to enforce this 1931 law, but you can't prevent others in the state from enforcing the law. Explain.
Well, there's 83 duly elected prosecutors for every county in our state. As Attorney General, I have statewide jurisdiction, and I ran on a platform of understanding that likely during the course of my term, Roe v. Wade would be overturned, and this incredibly draconian and strict 1931 law would criminalize abortion in this state with virtually no exceptions, no exception for rape, for incest, no exception for medical emergencies. And understanding that the lives of our 2.2 million women who are of childbearing age in this state, their lives would be at risk. I refuse to enforce this draconian law that will endanger their lives and put at jeopardy the health, safety, and welfare of the lives of each and every woman in the state of Michigan.
Okay, and here is that's Dana Nessel on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, who, by the way, got demoted this week from his daytime weekly Meet the Press, is now going to be on the Peacock Digital. A lot of people are talking about that. And so maybe the writing on the wall for Chuck Todd. Let's head over to Margaret Brennan, who is widely respected, one of the best anchors. I actually DM'd her over the weekend, last weekend, after her show on Sunday and said I thought she does a really good job. No one's perfect. Corporate media is far from perfect, but I think Margaret Brennan is probably the best Sunday show host, outside of everything that Ellie Velshi does. But I love her prep. She's smart. She has great questions. Here she is with the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, over the weekend.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion. California's Governor Gavin Newsom said Democrats have failed to target Republicans on this issue. Here's what he had to say.
Where is the Democratic Party? Where's the party? Why aren't we calling this out? This is a concerted, coordinated effort. And yes, they're winning. We need to stand up. Where's the counteroffensive?
Madam Speaker, why were pro-abortion rights Democrats outmaneuvered?
I have no idea. The fact is that we have been fighting for a woman's right to choose, and that is to choose. We have been fighting against the Republicans in the Congress constantly because the fact is they're not just anti a woman's right to choose in terms of terminating a pregnancy, but in terms of access to contraception and family planning and the rest, both domestically and globally. Mm-hmm. This is a constant fight that we've had for generations, decades, I should say, right. In my case, in the Congress. And we had been bipartisan early on, support for a woman's right to choose, until the politics have changed. And that's what happened at the court. Yeah. The science hasn't changed. But the court changed, and therefore they're deciding that it will be different. I have no idea why anybody would make that statement unless they were unaware of the fight that has been going on.
Well, you have been fighting for decades on this issue, but back when Democrats held majorities in the House and the Senate, 2009, when you were Speaker, President Obama was asked about codifying Roe versus Wade and said abortion's a moral and ethical issue and, quote, not the highest legislative priority. Do you think it was a mistake for him, for other presidents, not to push harder when Democrats had the majority?
If I just may, the focus we have right now is an urgent one in order to try to improve this, what we're calling it, fake or draft decision, whatever it is. I think that this is a waste of time. The fact is, in 2009, we really did not have a pro-choice Democratic Party. I had to fight against some of the people who did not want to pass the Affordable Care Act because they were concerned that it might enable more freedom of choice. It really didn't go down that path. Right now, we do have a pro-choice Democratic Congress, and we passed the law a month ago, and last, I think, September.
You did in the House.
It's been a while. It's a number of votes. But
the votes aren't there in the Senate.
Well, the Senate is, you'll have to talk to the Senate about the Senate, but I do think that it puts an urgency on what's happening in the election. One or two more senators could sweep back the filibuster rule for this purpose, and then women would have a right to choose. This is about something so serious and so personal and so disrespectful of women. Here we are on Mother's Day, a week where the court has slapped women in the face in terms of disrespect for their judgment about the size and timing of their families. So the fact is, let's keep our eye on the ball. The ball is in the court. Those justices, one of them at least, said over and over again that the precedent has been established again and again on Roe v. Wade, and so this decision is about being anti-precedent and anti-privacy, and has serious ramifications as we go down this path. And it has to be softened. I don't think there's a good outcome, but there's a better outcome.
All right, Nancy Pelosi on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. And now let's go over to Fox News Sunday, where Brett Baer had Lindsey Graham on. And Linz had an answer for the precedent question. Listen to this nightmare.
Just on the substance of the ruling, if it turns out to be what this draft opinion suggests, some senators are now openly questioning whether they were misled in the confirmation hearings. Here is Justice Kavanaugh, and you did some of that questioning in his confirmation hearing. Take a listen.
It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court entitled to respect under principles of stare decisis. And one of the important things to keep in mind about Roe v. Wade is that it has been reaffirmed many times.
And this is from Senator Susan Collins this week. If this leaked draft opinion is the final decision and this reporting is accurate, it would be completely inconsistent with what Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh said in their hearings and in our meetings in my office. What do you say to that?
Well, you cut off my questioning because I asked Judge Kavanaugh, would you consider challenges to Roe v. Wade? Would you listen to both sides? You would apply the doctrine of stare decisis, but would you shut the party trying to overturn the decision out? This has not been well accepted by the public. The public has been divided since 1973. Ask your next guest, who's a good friend, does he want the court to reconsider Citizens versus United regarding campaign finance laws? Would he welcome a revisiting of the Heller decision where the court said the Second Amendment was a personal right? So my liberal friends don't mind the court overturning decisions they don't like. They very much are against overturning decisions that they agree with. So you can't bargain your way into getting onto the court. So any senator who tries to bargain with a nominee, will you uphold the case I like or overturn the ones I don't, is really doing a disservice to the court.
And you're really doing a disservice to the United States Senate, America, the English language, decent moral people. I could go on and on. Lindsey Graham on Fox News Sunday, and Brett Baer also had a Democratic senator on, one of my favorites, Chris Murphy, and I'm going to play all of this for you because they had a weird disagreement, and I think Chris Murphy actually missed the answer to the question here, but they got into it about Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, and I thought it was interesting, so here it is.
That's my priority.
This week, the president criticized some of the potential policies floated by Senator Rick Scott. He called them MAGA, and he talked about the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again movement. Take a listen.
This MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history, in recent American history.
You agree with that statement and that effort politically? I mean, it has echoes of categorizing a whole bunch of people a certain way.
I mean, I am very concerned about the sort of very quick, hateful, divisive turn that the Republican Party has taken. This effort in Florida to sort of target gay kids in schools, I just think is mean-spirited and something that I had not seen from the Republican Party when I first started out in politics 20 years ago.
Well, hold on, I'm going to interrupt you. Yeah. To target gay kids in schools? I mean, the bill is about not talking about sexual identity from K through third grade. That's not targeting gay kids.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. It is sending a message to these kids that they are not worthy, that they should be ashamed of their identification.
It says, Senator, that you don't teach subjects with gender identity.
You don't think that those kids don't take a message from a ban on the discussion of their identity suggests that they are not worthy of existence in that school.
Senator,
half
do
of
you
trans
talk to your
kids in this country
about sexual identity?
Half of trans kids in this country have contemplated suicide, and that's because of the effort to bully them for their identity by adults in this country.
Senator.
So I absolutely do think that there's a message sent to these kids when you suggest that a conversation about their identity is somehow threatening the education of kids in our schools.
With your children, did you talk about sexual identity as a kindergartner? You don't talk about the birds and the bees, let alone the birds and the birds at that age, kindergarten through third grade.
So there was an amendment in the Florida legislature to ban sexual education in the early ages. That amendment failed because this wasn't about trying to protect children from a discussion about sex. This was an effort to specifically ban a conversation about topics related to sexual identity.
When he was asking him a couple times, do you talk with your kindergarten age kids about sexual identity? The answer is yes. You don't go into it, but some kid in class has two moms. Some kid in class might have two dads. Maybe the teacher does. You just identify that. No parent or teacher is talking about sex. They are talking about two moms and two dads, and that should never be inappropriate for someone to hide their sexual orientation. Daddy likes other men. Mommy likes other women. Deal with it. It's fine. This is exactly what we need to be doing for proper childhood development. And to hide it, it doesn't even make any sense. And it should be criminal. I hate this, and it's really frustrating. And for once, I feel like Christopher Murphy could have given a little better answer. But still, pretty good appearance on Fox News Sunday with Brett Baer, and I'm glad he goes on. And finally today, little advice from the vice president. This is Kamala Harris giving the commencement speech at the University of Tennessee this Saturday.
My advice to you is to be true to yourself. Hold close the values that your grandparents, your parents, your pastors, and your neighbors instilled in you. Have the courage and conviction to follow your moral compass.
Yeah, good advice from the Vice President Kamala Harris. And that is all the sound I've got for you here in the clip show part of the News Dump. And now it's time for the rest of the headlines with what we call lovingly the News Dump. Pete Coe with a new jingle based on a story out of South Dakota where police are warning of sick raccoons, a mink, and more.
South Dakota raccoons unafraid and feeling chuffed. They'll gladly eat your face on today's News Dump.
Oh dear, they're going to eat your face. That sounds terrible. Better get out of there or get those raccoons. All right, well, let's start with news of my favorite singer, Bono, performing in a Kiev subway at the invitation of President Zelensky. How about that? When you're being invaded by Russia, I guess you get special privileges. Apparently, U2 bandmates Bono and The Edge put on a surprise performance inside a Kiev subway on Sunday at the invitation of the president in a show of solidarity as the Russian war grinds into its third month, day 75, folks. They sang a song based on Stand By Me, changing the words to Stand By Ukraine. Also sang With or Without You and Sunday, Bloody Sunday. That's pretty much the only reason I'd want to be in that Kiev subway with those folks. But amazing. U2 tweeted on Sunday that Bono and The Edge traveled to Ukraine for the performance at the request of the president. I think I said that 3 times. All right. Here is more news. The G7 leaders are marking VE Day, stressing unity and support for Ukraine. Leaders from the Group of 7 developed democracies have pledged to phase out or ban the import of Russian oil as they met with Ukraine's president to stress their support. That is such a major deal and headline that they are going to consider phasing out Russian oil. What's Russia going to do after that? They are really put in a corner because of their leader. CDC is now investigating 109 mysterious pediatric hepatitis cases, including 5 deaths. The rate of pediatric hepatitis cases is still very rare, but reports of the cases, which have been identified in 25 states and territories over the past 7 months, come days after officials from the World Health Organization said they were investigating similar cases around the globe. So we'll keep our eyes on that one. Did you know that there is a total lunar eclipse event happening in May's must-see sky watching event, according to Space.com? See the fiery blood moon rise May 15th to 16th. The attention of millions will be drawn skyward, where a mottled coppery globe, the moon, will be completely immersed in the long tapering cone of shadow cast into space by our planet. The weather's clear. Sky watchers across most of the Americas, Europe, and Africa will have a view of one of nature's most beautiful spectacles, a total eclipse of the moon. Oh, very interesting. How about this? Average U.S. gasoline prices has jumped 15 cents to $4.38 a gallon. over the past 2 weeks, just a nickel below the highest average price in history of $4.43 set on March 11th. Those electric cars are looking better and better. Elon Musk, speaking of renewable energy, set the internet on fire with a cryptic tweet about dying under mysterious circumstances. Some suggested the Tesla CEO's cryptic tweet about death under mysterious circumstances might be referring to the Clintons, but it seems Musk is likely more worried about Russia. He wrote, "If I die under mysterious circumstances, it's been nice knowing you." When his mother responded, "That's not funny," on Twitter, he said, "Sorry, I will do my best to stay alive." And I only mentioned that Clintons thing because I'm reading this from FoxNews.com. I mean, really, there's somebody, I shouldn't have said that. I don't think anybody really thinks that it's the Clintons that are going to be taking any part in Elon Musk's death. A climber scaled Everest for the 26th time. He broke his own world record again. Nepali mountaineer Kami Rita Sherpa. His last name is Sherpa? Made history Saturday after summiting Mount Everest for the 26th time. Sherpa was already a record holder, having broken the record for summiting Everest 5 times in 4 years. He's a 52-year-old mountain guide, and he's summited Everest 25 times. And I was feeling amazing about my 3-mile run. You were feeling great about your walk or bike ride, and you should. You should. I'm just saying, helps create some perspective. All right, a couple more. The U.S. Senate will vote Wednesday on abortion rights bill. I don't think it has any chance of getting around a filibuster. And those wildfires continue to burn in New Mexico. Winds fuel New Mexico wildfire, complicating containment efforts, is the headline from the Washington Post. On Sunday night, strong winds continued into the day Sunday, helping spread the second largest wildfire on record in New Mexico farther into small farming communities in the state's mountain valleys as crews expect many more days of severe conditions. Although no deaths have been reported, the fires destroyed at least 276 structures and led to the evacuation of nearly 13,000 residences. And speaking of property loss, a total loss is what a popular South Florida floating restaurant has become because it sank. The owner of a popular floating restaurant in South Florida had that sinking feeling on Mother's Day, says KIRO 7 in Florida, Fort Lauderdale. Jay's Sandbar Food Boat, which cruises the intercoastal waterway in Fort Lauderdale, also sells food to other boaters. It sank on Sunday. Apparently, one of the pontoons snapped, and the floating boat that served customers for 3 years sank. Everybody's okay, but the boat is a total loss. And I thought that was a kind of funny story to end on, unless, of course, you're the Jay in Jay's Sandbar Food Boat. But I'm sure he's going to take it and turn it into something amazing. Good luck, Jay. And now it's time to get to my guests on today's show. First, I have a first-timer joining us. She's a research associate at the Toe Knight Center for News Integrity Initiative at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism in New York City. She runs at Decoding Fox News. She's an expert on the Proud Boys. She warned about them before almost anybody did. You can see her blog, read more at Juliet Jeske blog.com. She comes highly recommended from our friend at Jeff Jarvis, of course. And the work she's doing is vitally important. I wanted to share it with you. I wanted you to have her work as a tool so you could see what especially they're doing on Fox News without having to watch it. I've always wondered about what they do in their hour and who they have on, and I never really wanted to watch or look into it, certainly not every day. But that's exactly what Juliet does, and it's an important service for so many reasons that we talk about during our conversation. I think you're really going to like our conversation and her. Here she is for the first time on the show, and I hope you'll give her a shout on Twitter, and more importantly, a follow. That's what she'd really like you to do, is follow her Twitter handle at Decoding Fox News. You can also find her at Juliet Jeske. Here we go. All right, I've got Juliet now, and I'm very excited to have her joining me on Stand Up for the first time. Comes very highly recommended by the great Jeff Jarvis. We should maybe gossip about him or trash him.
I love Jeff Jarvis. Jeff Jarvis is great. He is incredibly enthusiastic about media.
Yes.
That's probably his best quality.
Yes.
Well, I'm not dissing him. He just loves it. No. incredibly passionate about new projects and about media in general.
Absolutely. And I love that about him as well. So, but we want to talk about you and your work today. Before we get to Decoding Fox News, which is your new venture, your new project, obviously, that I've told people about. How did you get started on watching and covering, what do we want to call it, right-wing media?
Yeah, I sort of accidentally stumbled into the Gavin McInnes show when it was on Compound Media. It's a cat behind me, sorry. That was before anybody really knew when he was forming the Proud Boys and before anybody knew what the Proud Boys were. And it was like, I knew somebody who got radicalized and I didn't know this person very well, but friends of mine were like, can you keep an eye on her? And I said, sure. And then before I knew it, I got more into Gavin McInnes. I was like, this guy's disturbing and what he's saying is really awful. And somebody needs to see this. And it snowballed over time. It was supposed to be like watch a handful of episodes, and it turned into me watching, capturing, editing up, archiving 407 episodes of, it was the entire series, which took years. It was not and this is while I was working like 3 part-time jobs and like cobbling together like an artist's life, and start working with journalists, and journalists were like, oh my God, because I'm super organized. So they loved my spreadsheet and how I kept everything kind of going. And then I developed a tolerance for this kind of work. And then I found out in grad school and in other projects, like basically, if you can stomach this, it's rare. So, which I always laugh at, because I'm like, it's not really a skill to sit through media you don't agree with. But apparently to other people, they're like always impressed.
I disagree with you, and I'll give you the argument as to why I think, but I was going to ask you that question. And I talked to Jeff. I said, we were talking about you, and I said, my question about Juliet and her work is how long could she or anybody take this stuff in before it really affects them in a negative way? And I think that's the reason why a lot of people can't, because it affects you in a negative way. It depresses you. It makes you scared, or it's scary to watch. And then obviously that affects the rest of your life potentially, and how you think. And, it can radicalize you in a way, I suppose, as well, not to agree with them, but just to feel a certain way. So how do you stomach it? How do you watch it? Obviously it's pretty, you vehemently disagree with what they're doing or what they're saying.
I've developed a sense of humor about it, which is weird, but that's my way of coping with it. When I would watch Gavin, whenever he gave me something that was just chef's kiss perfect, I would thank him. I go, thank you, Gavin. Thank you. And I would literally have to watch sometimes his shows were long, like an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And they would sometimes include nudity of him, which,
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. And really disgusting stuff on his part. And that would be rough. And I would have to watch sometimes, I would sit and watch 2 or 3 in a row just to be like, okay, I've got today off. I'll just get through 3 of these. And when I didn't find a clip, that's what would depress me. If I didn't get anything usable, yeah, I'd be so bummed out. I'd be like, I just sat through an hour and 45 minutes of garbage. I'd also speed him up. I sped him up 25% to make it go a little bit faster.
Yeah,
I can't do that with Fox because the way their stuff is formatted, I would miss stuff. But Gavin would just blather on, so I could speed him up.
So,
yeah.
Well,
but why did you laugh at it weirdly?
Why did you get interested in him to begin with? Why did you start doing this to begin with? What is your...
The woman who got radicalized, I don't like talking about her ever because she turns everything into about some conspiracy about her and makes herself the center of it.
Oh, God. Okay. Fair enough.
I don't even want to talk about that. So I don't really ever discuss her anywhere. And literally, like, she tried to get me arrested. So that just, it's nutty. And it's like, I didn't do anything except for capture video of her that's not flattering and give that to other people, which is perfectly legal. And when you broadcast something, you kind of take the risk that somebody who doesn't like you will capture it as well. That's just the way the world works. But it was mainly because it was at the heat of the peak of like 2016 when everybody was panicking because the alt-right, which kind of doesn't exist anymore, was kind of growing and building up all this steam, and everybody was freaking out. And the Proud Boys were formed in New York City. People don't realize that. They were formed right here in Brooklyn, in New York City by Gavin. They had their first meetings here, and there was a lot of panic and fear among people who were left of center and liberals and progressives, and, which is most of New York City. And there was this sense of urgency that we have to do something. And it wasn't just about Trump. It was about this whole movement behind him. And so I felt obligated. And the first time he said, it was like episode 5, this is where he hooked me. And I went, this is bad. This is really bad what he's doing. He said, I'm going to paraphrase. He said something to the effect of, all these people breaking these stupid laws, just get a fucking gun. And I was like, they can't kill us all. That was the full quote. Like, get a fucking gun, they can't kill us all. And I just went, you're nuts. And he was drunk when he said it. I'm assuming based on how he looked, and he was like visibly drinking on camera. And I just went, that's insane.
Yeah.
And that was way before he started into the Proud Boys and then the tiers of the degrees of the Proud Boys and then like incentivizing violence. But it became like this weird obsession of mine to collect clips, because somebody from a local Antifa group was like, oh yeah, if you can find clips where he looks bad. And I got rid of them because, I mean, Antifa, go do your thing, but they're not really into working with media. They're certainly not organized, and they're not like, I'm a very like, let's go kind of rigid, very hyper organized, workaholic, no nonsense type A. And so dealing with an organization where they don't get back to me, or they're kind of like, they don't, I can't handle
they're
that.
Not organized. I think
they're not at all. That's what's so funny when people act like they're this mastermind. I'm like, Antifa, are you kidding?
Yeah, no, we should talk about them some other point in terms of what you've learned from them and their lack of organization, I think, is and what they believe. I think it's really important. Yeah. So the Proud Boys, though, I mean, and everything that you've covered, let me just point out to folks listening that you and a few others have often been canaries in the coal mines warning of extremism. And I think corporate media always lags way behind because they are scared of racists. I'll never forget arguing with NBC News's Katie Tur on my Sirius XM show, where I certainly had a lot more freedom, when I said, maybe after a year of Trump being in office, nonchalantly, that he's a white supremacist. And she pushed back. And I'll never forget it, because she had to. Even though she'd covered him at all of his rallies and talked to the people at all the rallies, she still didn't understand what that meant. I'm certain some people still don't agree. But Juliet, you have basically been following the Proud Boys, and you actually, warned the New York Times early on, a specific reporter, about who they were, and others. And you've written about it for a long time, and others. And those reporters are catching up to you. In fact, one of the New York Times reporters reach out to you and apologize for not listening to you when you sent her material a long time ago. Could you tell me kind of about your, if you will, chirping in the coal mine, and how it was received and how it has been received? And I think how work like yours and others has been more respected now.
It's a mixed bag. I reached out to Amanda Marcotte over at Salon
Love
first
Amanda.
Because, Gavin made her a target. He was constantly ripping on her and trying to get his followers to harass her, openly would say that. And so I thought she's the perfect person to contact. So that was he created his own monster with that. So she was the first. And I found that like the alternative kind of weirdo press, HuffPo and I never worked directly with Daily Beast, but they do very similar work. I just didn't know anybody there. That was just a weird glitch. But I did know, once you meet one of these reporters that was on that beat, you start to meet all of them.
Yeah.
And some ignored me completely. I won't name anyone that ignored me, because I get how it is to be on the other end of that. You don't know if the source is crazy or not. Sure. The New York Times, though, was appalling, because I did go through all of these long, drawn out steps. And that was in 2018. And I had to go through all these gatekeepers, and I kept going, I have this for you. I want to give this to you. I'm going to give this to you for free. Please let me give this to you. And it never happened. And I did make it through some steps, and I don't know if it was an intern's fault or somebody lower down, but I never got really to the reporter. And I tweeted something at him when he wrote an article with somebody else, and they were like saying something about a warning sign. It was something in the headline that just set me off. And I said, dude, I sent you stuff like 2 years ago and you totally ignored me. And he actually, he ended up calling me, and we chatted on the phone, and he apologized. And I was like, whoa. And then at school, I got kind of mixed feedback. Some professors thought I was absolutely crazy. Some were incredibly supportive of my work, Most were kind of neutral, which is fine by me. Neutral's great.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple that got combative with me, like trying to like puff their chest, like, oh yeah, you did that? Really? Yeah. Well, guess what I did? They're both men. I'll say that, but I won't say who they were. But I was like, oh, this isn't good.
That's surprising. That's so surprising to me that they were men. So okay. Well, as a result, your work, I think, has been, started to been take more seriously, and having someone like I think Jeff Jarvis advocate and more like people introducing you, but more importantly, just the credibility that you build by predicting a thing, by covering a thing in this case, and saying this should be taken seriously. I really respect that about you and a few others because I feel like I share it. And the reason I share it is because I started in radio listening to a lot of right-wing radio. And I remember just thinking, man, if I believed this stuff, I would absolutely take up arms what they're saying on WABC. Mark Levin, I used to listen to him. And then my colleagues at Sirius XM, and they were serious. And now what we have seen this country turn into, I have said forever, and it's the only thing I think I might have been right about, is it's the right-wing media that has created this dynamic because Republican politicians were not this crazy. And I've been covering them for over 15 years. But now they answer to them. They have no policy. The policy is made by anyone from Tucker to Alex Jones to Hannity. And then the Republican congressmen at every level, they react to it. What's the narrative of the week? Nobody knows that better than you because you watch these shows hour by hour. You see what they cover and then you compare it and you chart it all. It's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. So I just wanted to just talk for a minute to say that I agree with it. And what is your reaction right now with where we're at in terms of right-wing media's influence on right-wing politicians? If you agree with my kind of thesis of it.
Completely agree. It's terrifying where something like the Keystone Pipeline. And when the war first started in Ukraine, within a week, Fox News, and what's interesting about Fox is they'll do it on all three shows that I cover, because I switch up the primetime show, but I always watch The Five and Fox and Friends. And I specifically go after them because they're the ones that are more manipulated by the network. And they're like, it's open that they do this. Like some of the news shows are more actually legitimate news. But Fox and Friends, that was, Trump's favorite. And The Five is like, ooh. And then the primetime shows, the primetime host, The Five is like, just give me strength. But then because it's so dumb, they talk about anything stupid. It's just
by the way, just can I just get one take on The Five? And specifically, this happens a lot, but I feel like it happens with Geraldo a lot. So last week on The Five, Geraldo got into it with the great Greg Gutfeld, and he has done this before, and frankly, Geraldo's no match, in my opinion, for Gutfeld. A lot of people aren't. People underestimate him. I don't. And I know him. He gave me a lot of opportunities. I don't like him. I don't respect him. But I think that he's very good at kind of pivoting and getting away with stuff. Anyway, my question is, it seems like even the fights are so manufactured that WWF writers would have been like, nah, we can't. It looks too fake.
I didn't do anything with that clip. I saw that clip and just went, no, I'm not clipping that. I'm not using that.
Is it all like kind of, are they talking in the locker room later and patting each other in the back? Like, that was funny, wasn't it? That'll give us ratings.
I just thought it was ridiculous. Yeah. But like what I was going to say about the Keystone Pipeline interesting. No, it's no worries. Is all of a sudden that first week out of the Ukraine war, somebody sent a memo. I don't know this, but this is what it looked like from a viewer who's critical, not a fan. And show after show, even guest hosts across the board for a week would do this. They'd go, this war in Ukraine, I think there's one thing that we could do is I was thinking about this, and maybe if we opened up the Keystone XL pipeline, we could get that oil flowing and then take that power away from the Russian government. And then 20 minutes later, a guest would come on and go, you know what? I was thinking. And I'm like, come on. It was so obviously manufactured. It was so obviously scripted. Like, this is what you're going to say. Because it would be talking point after talking exactly the same
specific
language.
You always know that there's a similar argument being made, and that happens in all orientations, progressive media and so on. Talking points, arguments. I've done it. I'm lazy. I see somebody else's argument. I make it. But in this case, it seems a lot more organized. As what you're saying is that not only that, even the phrasing of the Keystone Pipeline talking point was, I was thinking like it was that specific.
It was that specific. And I made a montage of it because it was driving me crazy. Because I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like there's no way that they're all spontaneously, because they would literally say stuff like, I just came up with this idea. They would literally act like nobody had fed it to them. And then I would check Twitter, and within a week, elected officials are like, you know what we need to do? We need to reopen that Keystone Pipeline. And it was like, they just echo immediately what Fox says. It takes sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's that day. And Trump did, and sometimes it takes about a week, but you see it immediately. And
just to be clear, that was a twofold thing. One, you could blame Biden and Democrats for Russia's invasion. And if only we had all the oil, we wouldn't have to worry about them. And two, it's just the anti-climate, pro-oil, pro-energy, pro-fossil fuels point. So the fossil fuel industry loves it. And then all the right-wing talkers love it because you can blame Biden for Putin's actions.
Yes. And then within a day or two of them pushing this, you go to Washington Post, and then there's article after article after article debunking what they said. And basically the Keystone Pipeline would not be enough oil. It's Canadian oil. It was meant to go out of the U.S. Like boom, boom, boom.
So you're saying then the corporate mainstream media fact checkers, journalists have to then take up these talking points and debunk them. And that's how it works. So you watch. Tell folks a little bit about kind of what you do and how you document it, because I think there's some really specific things that you're doing are super important, like pointing out percentage of, quote, experts and how they classify experts, especially with things like COVID or climate. Not to mention, I think the other really important thing you do is not question the, quote, dubious experts, but you and this is what I've always been looking for somebody to do to help my work, but because it takes a lot of time, charting the editorial choices of what these networks and hosts are covering in their hour. It would seem that a lot of the mainstream corporate media, certainly the journalism, the PBSs of the world, they structure their TV hour in a certain way. Top stories. What are the most important stories that impact people? They go to correspondents and, of course, experts. Though what you're watching on Fox and right-wing news, they live on Earth, too, where they manufacture things half the time, but the question is, you chart it all. You watch it and you chart it all. How do you do it? Because it's such a good service for us to understand the difference between what they're doing and what the rest of media on what I call Earth One are doing.
I have, I'm the queen of the spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets because I have this like wacky organizational bug in me. And I started doing this early on with my work against Gavin, because I figured out pretty quickly it was the only way to keep track of everything. So for this project, I'm hyper detailed. So I take an episode, I cut the commercials out, it's usually 40 minutes, and then I open up a spreadsheet dedicated to that show. I have a code for the episode, the section of the episode. So if I sort it and resort it, it all comes back perfectly in line. So I have this kind of crazy coding system, date, who the host is, and then I write down topic, subtopic, because sometimes I'll flip, depending if I watch the whole segment, I'll make a judgment call of like, what is the dominant topic? Because sometimes they combine them. And then I do how many minutes. And then at the end, so every episode is documented minute by minute for the entire hour. And then at the end of the week, I take all 3 shows that I've covered, so it's 15 hours, and I stick it into one big, huge spreadsheet, and then make sure all my totals line up, and then do a pivot. I'm the queen of the pivot table, do a pivot table, and I can see immediately how much is dedicated to each topic.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I think you're making an assumption that me and everybody else knows what table? A pivot is. That an Excel tool?
A pivot table is basically just a fancy name for sorting information on Excel. So you just go, or Google Sheets or whatever. So you basically just say, like, if a topic is COVID-19, with a pivot table, with one swipe, you can find out this week, it was talked about for X amount of minutes, like say 80 minutes. And then you go, how many, and then I figure out percentages, which I'm a big nerd. and percentages. I do them by hand because I love doing them by hand, where you go equals and you do the little formula.
You are absolutely
a nut.
No, I'm not saying anything pejorative. I think you are original and needed. It's important that you have this skill set and that you're doing it this way. And I appreciate you explaining it, because I think it builds credibility and trust with the way that you are documenting this project, which is a really important form of journalism. Give me an example, if you can, off the top of your head, about an egregious night or hour where the rest of the world is talking about, say, 1 million COVID deaths or vaccines developments or other announcements, whether it be COVID or something else, or Ukraine. I think are the two easiest, the invasion in Ukraine topics. Give me an example of an egregious, situation where they just either ignored it, mentioned it, or did something, going back to Gutfeld, no matter how horrific it is. His lazy go-to is to criticize the media's reaction to a thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's an example of where they just ignored it or covered it in an Earth 2 way?
I've already figured out a pattern. This was pretty quick because I compare them to PBS NewsHour, which is like straight down the middle, almost painfully straight down the middle.
Sure.
They'll give Republicans and Democrats the exact same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
They bend over backwards to look nonpartisan. So the pattern I already found were Black people who were victimized by police officers or victimized in general. Fox News ignores those stories. And I'll give you great examples. The 3 cops who were arrested next to the man Chauvin, who killed George Floyd.
Yep.
That trial got a lot of coverage that week that they were on trial. Fox completely ignored it, didn't mention it at all. When the Ahmaud Arbery murderers were up for federal crimes, for a federal trial for hate crimes that was separate from the state trial, that also got a lot of play on mainstream media. Fox did not cover it at all. The woman who is stuck in Russia right now, the WNBA player, hasn't got a lot of play. Fox gave it 30 seconds for an entire week. That's it. Another one was there was the Breonna Taylor. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the cops who shot her or was involved in that case had a trial that got a lot of play in mainstream media. Fox did not cover it at all. Meanwhile, they put a lot of time in the Jussie Smollett case that no one else cared about. So that's what they do. They spent an entire week on Will Smith. And they would cover the Will Smith slap.
If a Black person, I don't have to explain it. I think everybody knows what you just explained is how they cover it in terms of who the victim is and who the aggressor is. And if a white person kills a Black person, we don't hear about that. We certainly don't hear the details of the case, much less the court case as much. I think it's fair to say. And then the opposite, when a Black person commits a crime, it's wall to wall. Even if they don't know, it just wall to wall.
Yeah, they just don't. It was just the most shocking one was the George Floyd case, because that did get so much coverage, and they just didn't mention it. They also don't mention stories about the climate. So the UN came out with a bunch of a series of studies that said, we're so terrified about what's going to happen with the climate.
Yep.
One right after the other. It was a 5,000-page document.
Yep.
I found it online. Fox didn't talk about it at all. It's just they just ignore stories.
Well, going just back to the Jussie Smollett, that's an example of a Black person making up a crime and blaming it on white people. And so they play the shit out of that or anything else. And that is what creates a narrative that is commonplace, when of course it's a major aberration, because it's not in the interest of Black person, much less Black people, to do such a thing. And and so they play the hell out of that. If a Black girl beats up a white girl, or it's not common, because when you're in the minority, you're not doing such things. Usually people beat up people who are like them, obviously. They play the hell out of that because it creates a narrative that's the norm and you should be afraid. And that's how it creates, in my opinion, and I think there's a lot of research on this, this kind of mentality of that you're under attack, in this case, by Black people or by whatever it is. Or you're not under attack by the things we are, like COVID and climate. That's not a thing.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, too, is they also make crazy assumptions. Like the subway shooter, Frank James, I believe his name was, he was kind of a crazy person, and they found his YouTube videos. He kind of went after everybody, including Black people. Fox leaves all those quotes out and just says, oh, he's a black nationalist. And I'm like, he literally said in like Daily Beast did a great job where they found the other quotes where he was trashing black people. He's a black, and he literally is using the N-word saying, I know I'm one of those people too, but they should be wiped off the face of the planet. Like, this is not a black nationalist. This is just a person who's out of his mind, who was trashing every group, including white people, including black people, including Latino people and Asian people. He didn't care. I would not call that person a black nationalist. But,
it's a perfect example of we as citizens should want a well-rounded, well-reported out story about a person or an incident where you get all kinds of witness reactions and you get as much, where you can't be accused of not listening to a witness or a point of view. And as you said earlier, sometimes it's too much. I mean, this week, Andrea Mitchell was being dragged on social media because she had an anti-abortion activist on, and a lot of people thought that was too much. So it depends on the spectrum. Let me ask you about dubious experts when it comes to COVID. Who did you see coming on Fox and continue to see to teach us about viruses mutating and how vaccines work, et cetera?
Well, Tucker just had Adam Carolla and Jimmy Fallon on to talk about COVID-19.
Yeah,
and
I know
that
Jimmy.
Just made me fall over laughing. And then there's a guy, I'm not going to remember his name. He was a journalist who, it's going to come to me after I tell you this, but he was a journalist who...
Alex Berenson?
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of. He got kicked off of Twitter for posting all this COVID-19 stuff that wasn't, You know what his jam was before COVID, right? What made him kind of famous before that? No, I just knew he was a journalist.
Anti-marijuana.
Oh,
yeah.
What?
Yep.
Why?
I'm not telling you why.
To focus on. That is so dumb.
Joe Rogan had him on with a pro-weed guy to debate long before Rogan was really controversial. I mean, he kind of always was if you paid close attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where Alex Berenson went. But I interrupted you on the COVID thing and experts.
No worries. No, that's kind of the Alex Berenson is one of his main people that he had on a lot. And then there's a couple other tricks that Fox does is they have a surgeon on quite a bit to talk about. He's a medical doctor, but he's a surgeon. So like, that's not his specialty at all. And he'll talk about infectious diseases, and it's like Marty.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, but it's no different. It's like Rand Paul is an ophthalmologist, but he questions climate science and vaccine, all of it. I mean, it's important that we book experts on subjects to talk about them. So
and it's really embarrassing when you compare him to PBS, because PBS, like, again, they get like the best. They get like the best people in the world on their show. They get world leaders on their show, and then Tucker's like. Literally, he just did the Jimmy Fallon bit where he was just basically that clip was 3.5 minutes where Jimmy Fallon just made fun of Vice President Kamala Harris for getting COVID. It was like, I guess that vaccine doesn't work.
I knew him starting out. I knew him starting out as a comic. We were always friends, and then he, like a bunch of other, certainly male white comedians, went right for the money and that direction. And I'm surprised you didn't chart this one, Juliet. I was kind of surprised that you missed this. But Tucker Carlson recently had on to talk about the fact that French fries are not unhealthy. He had Ronald McDonald on, and you did nothing with that. Why?
Oh, no, I don't always cover him, though. I move my primetime people.
I'm joking.
But people do that to me. They go, you didn't get this one last week. I go, I wasn't covering
Juliet, he had Ronald McDonald on to say French fries were completely, they were great for you.
Why not? I could
and all.
See him doing it. I could see him doing it. That's how he does it. He's like, he doesn't like. Well, they also during that whole Keystone Pipeline thing, they kept having oil lobbyists.
Oh,
like they would say lobbyists underneath their name, and they're like, "We need to pump more oil." And I'm like, that's somebody trying to sell oil. Are you kidding me? And they don't care. They're shameless. They're absolutely shameless.
And so pretty much every day you just take me again through your routine, what you watch.
My routine is I get up. I kind of have comedian hours in that I'm late because so I get up, start capturing the first hour of Fox and Friends that I don't get a lot of clips from. And it's not usually as people they don't jump on it as much. So it's not as important that I get up at 6 a.m. to do that. So usually later. And then I capture the 5 almost always live. So I'm there watching it the whole time to see if I want anything from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get one of the primetime shows, and the ones that gets the most clicks is Tucker, although the clip that got me 1 million views is from the 5, which was the Jesse Waters saying horrible things about his now wife. Well, he didn't say horrible things about her.
No, I just watched the clip. Jesse Waters on Fox News admitted that he met his now wife by deflating her tires and then basically coming to her rescue. And they kept asking him if he was joking. And he said, no, I am not. We're now married. And then even Judge Judy was clearly offended by what is super creepy and definitely illegal. You cannot deflate someone's tires. You can't do that. That's a crime.
Yeah. And what was funny about that, it was Easter week. My computer melted down. So I was way behind that week. Like I had a catastrophic hard drive failure and I was trying to resurrect it. And so I was very distracted, and Easter week's weird because they mix everybody up. So Tyrus was on the 5, like, really? We're doing this? And so I was like, well, I finally got around to getting my clips on that Saturday. So it was way late. And I think the only reason why nobody picked that up is because it was Easter week. People weren't paying attention. And then second, I don't know if men would have caught that clip. I caught it immediately. I went, what the hell did he just say? And I posted it thinking nothing of it. And then it just went, woo! And
Yeah,
I was like,
I think maybe I'll play that for people when I wrap here, which I'll do now because I told you how much time I will take. But I am not done talking to you, and I hope everybody listening checks out your work. All of the links are in today's show notes, as they are for all of my guests. But go follow Juliet on Twitter. I think that's probably the easiest place to connect with you, but unless there's another better place.
Substack is in my bio for Decoding Fox News, and my personal profile on Twitter and Decoding Fox News kind of blur into the same thing.
Elliot at Decoding Fox News, at Juliet Jeske, and JulietJeskeblog.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much for talking to me, and keep up the great work. Somebody has to.
Thanks, Pete Dominic.
How about it? Juliet Jeske, the first time on Stand Up. So it'd be great if you reached out to her and let her know that you appreciated her joining me. But it'd be even better, I think, for you to just check out her work and see what she's doing and support it any way that you can. I'd love to have her back. She's a fascinating and original person. Again, she is, of course, on Twitter at Juliet Jeske. More importantly, at Decoding Fox News. Go follow that account, JulietJeskeblog.com. Let her know you heard her here on the show, and that always makes a huge difference. All right, now it's time to get to my second guest of today's show. He is a stand-up comedian, the best Trump impressionist in the world. He has a new Patreon. You can support him with a couple of bucks a month. Patreon.com/JL Cauvin. Wanted to announce that. He graduated from Georgetown Law School, so he's also a practicing lawyer, as well as a super talented stand-up comedian with a whole bunch of stand-up specials, albums recorded. And we're recording again this weekend, re-recording the album special that he taped. There was a little bit of a technical difficulty the first time, so we're redoing it. I'm opening for him and warming up for him. I'm very excited about that. That's this weekend. Go to jlcauvin.com. and check it out if you're in or around New York City. And hopefully we'll see you there, May 14th, 9:30 p.m. at the Triad Theater. You can also see him in Pennsylvania, City Winery in Boston in July. And just check out all the dates at jlcauvin.com. And, of course, check out his podcasts, Making Podcasts Great Again, every Wednesday, Righteous Prick, every Tuesday, and right now at JL Cauvin. All right, there he is, ladies and gentlemen, JL Cauvin. It's been far too long. The two of us will be, I'll be opening for him at his second taping of his special. We'll get it right this time, this weekend, if you're going to join us. But I just want to first start by saying you offended a lot of people on Mother's Day. Why on earth would you pick this day where we're honoring moms to be so abrasive and so divisive? You tweeted yesterday, Happy Mother's Day to all the moms, or as I call them, persons of motherhood. Man, you just...
I kicked the hornet's nest with that one.
What happened?
No, it was, I really thought my joke there, like I refer to myself often on social media as a person of height. And that's just playing off of person of color. There's no ill will.
I'm a bald.
A person of
hair loss.
A person of hair loss. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
A person of prominent forehead, if we wanted to keep it positive. And somebody, I guess, took that. I often joke. I do this across social media platforms. Facebook is a little more people I know, a few fans, but more people I know. So I will sometimes gripe about what's going on Twitter, on Facebook. Like it's a safer space to mock some people getting offended. But I can tell when some of my jokes might offend, but my goal is never to offend. But this was definitely a preposition-based joke that I thought was safe for all ages. But a person wrote to me, "I was following you until this," and I wrote, "Oh no." Not like because there was going to be no reasoning that would make me rethink my position on prepositions. And I'm sorry if I'm old school or originalist when it comes to preposition jokes, but I believe that they were okay, are okay, and I will fight with my life to defend jokes making fun of prepositions. And this person went off.
That's the hill you want to die on. And the overwhelming responses are positive and smart, funny followers of yours. It's not like you said Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers that had another choice. That's one. I didn't know you were a comic. Unfollowed, reported, and blocked, said somebody.
Yeah, it was one of those things where they interpreted my joke, which was literally just goofy wordplay, and interpreted as on this day when Alabama is passing some sort of anti-trans bill, I believe, or it goes into effect, which I didn't know. And when Don Jr. is making fun of trans people or on Mother's Day, which I didn't know because I don't follow Don Jr. That was a lot to read into my joke that had nothing to do with that.
Well, the vast majority of people were saying, "I still love you, JL. You made a very clever pronoun joke. I think it's hilarious." Well, what else is Mother's Day? People were like, they were using it to be divisive, like they really were. I mean, I think your joke is fine.
No, don't get me wrong. If that's what happened in Alabama, if like a law that they kicked in today, of course that's intentional. It's trolling at a government. You never want your government to troll you individually. That seems excessive. But that's the Trump. The Trump spirit is about being a bully to as specific a degree as possible.
Right, meaning targeting a specific group on a specific day. For example, at our middle school, it was the day of silence for my daughters in solidarity with LGBT. And that's the day they chose to wear. Some students
that community's known for being quiet. Oh, is that not where we were going with that? I'm sorry. No, continue.
What you're saying is the day of solidarity should include the most flamboyant and voluminous behaviors. Like if you're in solidarity, you should have worn a feather boa and been singing Queen.
Yeah. Like Mike Pence in private.
Anyway, on that day, like students chose to do this, like affirm straight marriage, like on the day of Mother's Day. What is a woman and all of that. And it's, of course, Mother's Day. It was interesting on the Sunday shows, JL. I watch them all, or I listen to them all while I'm outside building things that aren't straight or even remotely reliable to stand upon. But all of like the kind of the Republicans that had to come on the Sunday shows, including the governor of Mississippi, they were all like, Happy Mother's Day to the anchor, Margaret Brennan. And she is like, yeah, thanks. And thanks for taking away women's rights. And it was just a weird juxtaposition to on Mother's Day to be talking about what happened this week with abortion rights.
No, it's, I was talking to my friend Erwin Chemerinsky this week about what was going on. It was a three-way call with Eric Siegel, but Erwin said, Siegs can wait, okay? And we were booking our tickets to the Aspen Ideas Festival to discuss this very topic. And I said, hold on, let me talk to Pete first. But I think Samuel Alito, the way I phrased him in a comedy video, but I meant it, was he strikes me as the what if Scalia had no friends and no wit? Do you know what I mean? Like if you just distilled all the things that people hate about Scalia with none of the things Ruth Bader Ginsburg liked about Scalia, you're left with like an oozing pile of disdain known as Samuel Alito.
He is an unlikable fellow. I mean, you can't even go hunting with him. Like, you know, there's no skeet shooting. There's just, I don't know what he does. As
Professor Siegel has spoken of Clarence Thomas, at least having much like Trump, maybe having some individual short bursts of charisma or congeniality. You know, if you take them in small doses, they're able to convey some kind of casual, hey, that was a pretty nice exchange. Like, I feel like Samuel Alito doesn't have that in him. Yeah. Like, he doesn't even have that ability.
Yeah, I don't know who's written a book on him, but I'd love to learn more about this guy. He, of course, wrote The Decision, and it is ruthless and refers to, like, laws from, like, 1,000 years ago. Saturday Night Live, they had a funny sketch kind of about that.
Oh, don't spoil it. I got to watch it tonight.
It's pretty good. It's just the idea of this kind of archaic, we're really taking a step backwards. How do you see this playing out in America? You're a legal scholar yourself.
That's a stretch. But yeah.
You follow politics. I mean, do you think that it's the red states make abortion illegal to the point that if you even drive someone, much less conduct the abortion, you're going to jail, like all that stuff? And then the blue states are these sanctuaries of reproductive rights? Or do you think that the entire federal government, if Republicans take back the House especially, they have the Supreme Court, so no matter what they do to, quote, codify women's reproductive rights, this same Supreme Court can overturn that and turn us right back to the Handmaid's Tale for all states? What do you think?
I think we're at it's going to be different for different states, which is bad enough. And I have a complicated, as you know, I'm Catholic, and I have a complicated personal history as well on this issue. But I remember turning down a show a few years ago, and that was they wanted me to do Trump. This was pre-pandemic. A big kind of abortion rights comedy show, and part of me was like, well, this would be a good opportunity for exposure and stuff like that, obviously. And I couldn't do it because I'm in that Joe. Like, that's what I don't think people maybe realize about Joe Biden is he is a begrudging. I think if you asked him in perfect candor, a begrudging supporter. Like, he's a supporter because he thinks it is the right thing to do, but he's not like personally stoked about it. And it was weird to be like on a comedy show where it's like, women will get up there and like share their stories, and then you come up as Trump. And I was like, I'm all for your cause, but I don't want to, like, I don't find it fun. I don't find any kind of like, I think you maybe understand a little bit of what I'm saying. And I'm sure there's more people, you want to enthusiastically support the right to choose, but maybe not, most people, if you ask them seriously, are like, yeah, I'm not pumped about abortion. I'm not stoked.
You were asked to take part in a fundraiser. You'd have been paid for it, and you would have raised money for the cause. Would you donate money to the same cause? Do you support a woman's right? The law and itself. What are we talking about?
Yeah,
if you got a lady pregnant and she wanted to get an abortion, what would you say? You've been there, haven't you? By the look on your face, it looks like you've already made this decision.
I didn't, and I think that's the real pain. If you want to be,
have you ever been with a woman?
I'm a eunuch, so no, simply platonically. But yeah, it's one of those things where I vote. I've never voted a Republican in my life, and this is one of those things that what I would say is, no matter how personally opposed, and that's sometimes I think that's mocked a little bit, that like it's not a real position of being personally in your own life, not a fan, not someone that, not a choice you would make, but that you don't impose that personal belief on others. But I feel like that's treated often like a cliche and not a real stance. Like, I think somebody like Joe Biden probably has that true belief. Like, if Jill first of all, if Jill Biden got pregnant, I think you got to keep it because that's a miracle.
I think that's a good point. No, but my stance is it's not for men at all to have a say on. It's not our bodies, period. Like, I don't care what you think. Honestly, it's not a choice that you have to make. You're not involved. So even if you were
say, if you obviously, if somebody you're with, just not as a legal matter,
right?
But somebody you're with, would you hope they would address it with you just as a relationship matter, not as I know I can't interfere legally with you making this decision, but like on a personal level, would you want to be left out of that decision?
Yeah, I don't think it all depends, of course. I mean, if you were trying to get pregnant, but if it were an accident and it happened, then I think she doesn't even necessarily need to tell you. She doesn't have to tell you, I think, either way, probably. But if you're married trying to get pregnant, I don't know why you wouldn't. But no, I mean, it's really not I think it depends on the relationship, I suppose. You know, how close are you with this person that you got pregnant, that you had sex with? But in the end,
if she's a fan. No.
Well, then I don't think you get to, I don't think it. Does she want, if she wanted a very tall baby and that's why she had sex with you?
Well, the truth is it's what I offer at the highest level of my Patreon. So I feel like once we do that, you've got to sort of tell me.
Wait,
right?
do you offer
sex? Aren't we contractually bound via Patreon?
What is that? And I've mentioned this already at the top, but in your intro. But what is that Patreon level? They get to make love to you, and you're very fertile. What you're like a Koresh, a David Koresh of sorts.
Yeah, a carafe of Cauvin is what the level is called.
Oh, they don't have to have sex with you. They just get your frozen seed.
Well, okay, and that's tier 3. Tier 4 is sex.
Right.
Tier 5 is date and sex.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta be more creative with my Patreon. My tier 4 is snuggling, with like just platonic snuggling, and that's as far as I go, I suppose.
That's good.
Men, women, I don't care. Old, young, skinny, large, doesn't make a difference. You get to cuddle, little cuddling.
Nice. Well, back to the series. I think what we are headed towards is for the foreseeable future, is a state by state process. And obviously, if this opinion holds in some form close to this, Mississippi and Ohio and Wyoming, if anybody still lives there, they can all they will be able to ban it, I think. And that's where we'll be. And it's disappointing because, they're usually in the law, there's usually some degree of, reliance. If society has relied on something for a long time, like a positive right, you usually give that some deference. Like if it's going to upset normal life. Now, what I think some people would say is, we're looking at it on the pro-life side. If they're, for the 9 of them that are not cynical opportunists in Congress, I think they would say, well, we're ensuring the rights of the unborn. Like, we're not looking at it as taking away rights from women. We're restoring rights to the unborn. I think that's just how they would phrase it, because otherwise you can't really compare taking away a right to something like Plessy versus Ferguson. You can't say, oh, look, see, we're if you look at it from the side of the women, which of course is how most people look at it, you're taking away their right. But to the most committed, the non-cynical out there, disagree with them if you will, but I think even Professor Siegel speaks with some deference to the truly, disagrees, but I think to the true religious values. I think there are some people who hold those sincerely.
Well, that's what it is. It's a religious value almost entirely, people who are anti-abortion, anti-choice are religious and almost always some kind of Christian, especially, obviously Catholic, but that's about half of Catholics, I think, or maybe less. I mean,
I'd like to quote Toby from The West Wing, if I may.
Sure.
Where he taught when Richard Schiff, the actor, he said, I just remember this. It stuck out to me, obviously, but he said at least he was talking about some issue with somebody, and he said, well, at least the Catholics, give them their due. At least it's a consistent ethic of life. There's charity works. There's anti-death penalty. Right. So disagree, if you will. At least there is a across the board. Whereas as I always joke, but it's not really a joke, the Christian right, to me, and plenty of Catholics who align with it. So I'm not trying to have an out for the Catholics, but it really feels like a church steeped in Old Testament wrath, a few political points, and almost nothing that Jesus said. And I don't even mean that flippantly. I literally mean I don't know what actual this GOP Christianity seems to be its own creation, not founded in any kind of text or spiritual tradition other than Republican politics.
And I think at this point, white people's rights being infringed upon. I mean, I always feel like it's seemingly always there. So I think we're headed towards a divide. I mean, it's hard to believe that. It doesn't feel like that's possible, but that seems exactly where we're headed. Do you think that they go for other rights that we've hard fought won, gay marriage? And some people have even suggested interracial marriage and overturning the Loving decision.
I grew up with my parents, and I've been a stout opponent of interracial marriage ever since.
But your dad is black, your mom is white, but you're not against interracial marriage on its face. You're against it specifically for your mom and dad.
Well,
or are you specifically is it no Irish and Haitians?
I'm extrapolating. I have a lot of evidence that it doesn't work.
Based on just your mom and dad?
How much of fights? Like they had enough fights for 12 couples, for 12 interracial couples.
And you're sure it's because your dad's Haitian and your mom's Irish?
He's actually from Mars and she's from Venus. Get it right, please.
Do you see it? Do you see it going there? It doesn't go to interracial marriage, does it?
No, but here the problem is it doesn't go there because it's if you give the Samuel Alito, precedent now, if it holds, like this will be Supreme Court precedent. If you were to then give that to a robot whose job it was to interpret constitutional law and say what rights could be taken away and what couldn't. Right. I think that robot could look at that and say, oh, if this is binding precedent, it can easily be applied to racial marriage. But I think the human beings that will occupy the court will not do that. That doesn't make this decision any more right. Just like Bush v. Gore, they threw in the caveat, this only applies here, FYI. Well, you don't do that on the Supreme Court. Like you can say that, but you don't do one-off cases on the Supreme Court, no matter how much you want to pretend like that's what you just did. Like I said, if 9 new people get on the court and decide or have been appointed and decide that they want to read the Alito opinion as it's written, they could undo many cherished sort of things. It's not going to happen with interracial marriage, but that's not a matter of law. That's a matter of just common sense. But as a matter of law, I think they could.
Right.
Which is dangerous enough. It's dangerous enough that it's just like left this door open that now it's not law. It's personal feelings and common sense stopping certain things from happening.
And what about Obergefell or gay marriage?
Yeah, I think you could have a case. You could easily have a Mississippi and Alabama bring a case and argue that sort of thing. And the sad thing is this country is is shifting so much that I think you will be able to have states maybe in our lifetime that become like these little theocracies. You know what I mean? Like the state of Mississippi, 50th in reading, 50th in health, 50th in and first in theocratic tyranny. Like I think you could have that. I mean, that's not out of the question, that it's like, we're moving out of Mississippi because we no longer want to be part of the illiterate Taliban. The toothless Taliban, I think, more alliterative there. The toothless Taliban.
I just saw the Taliban announce that they're reinstituting the full burqa for women.
Throwback Thursdays.
And well, yeah. Well, I just thought, I was like, how far behind is the American right? How far? Not that far. They're not that far. I mean, they're not banning music or kite flying yet. They're not making us grow beards and so on. But
I can't. So
that would be problematic for you.
I'd have one of those patchy, what's wrong with your skin? It's just a bunch of ingrown hairs.
So you would be penalized, but you're so tall it wouldn't matter. But I mean, how far behind are we? I mean, it's their form of religious authoritarianism, and we have ours.
Exactly. Because I remember when I read Taylor Branch's trilogy on the King years, and it was nothing short of, I said, we think of ourselves somehow different in the Jim Crow, all of Jim Crow, into the 1960s. It was Christian terrorism. Nothing short. It was nothing short of hardcore global tragedy terrorism going on in the South. That's, my parents were alive and in the country during that, while that was happening. And we don't do certain things, but I think this is our version. And in a weird way, at least the Taliban is, although objectively worse overall, they're only going back like 10 years in their history. You know what I mean? They're only going back. We just want it to be like 2003. Granted, our 2003 was 1482 to everyone else. But for us, it's only 10 to 15 years back, whereas we'd like to undo 50 years or maybe 80 years of law and custom and culture.
Yeah. Oh, good points. I feel that's exactly where we're at.
But I will say one other thing. I do get annoyed, and it's sort of the Bernie wing of progressives, that it's very popular, like trending on Twitter was do something in all caps, because people are saying Joe Biden must do something. Yeah. And I'm going, I know there are some things he can do, but this idea of we must codify Roe, not happening. Not happening.
Not only is the Senate,
just not happening. Joe Manchin is pro-coal, pro-life, and pro-filibuster. He's sort of the polite. He's the polite, gentlemanly version of what Trump is doing. He's basically saying,
yes, well said.
No to everything, but I'm saying it with a calm voice and a nice demeanor, and I do like people, but I don't want any of these important things to change.
I thought it was too far when he kind of nonchalantly said, if women don't want to get pregnant, they shouldn't have sex, and to do that, they should have to hold a piece of coal between their knees at all times. I thought that was too far. Richard Murdoch did that years ago, and he got knocked out of a primary, and yet it didn't even affect Manchin. Hold a piece of coal, JL? That's too far.
Everybody knows in the Republican Party, coal is for blackface only.
Right. And some Democrats, let's be clear. Yeah. Let's be perfectly clear. You went to a book party for this New York Times writer's book, This Shall Not Pass.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
How did you get invited? How do you feel? How was it? And that book has outraged me because of the criticism of newspaper reporters holding on to super relevant information for a book. I had a guest talking just about that, a print journalist talking all about that. He was pissed. Earl.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think
Earl Stevens.
Alex Burns sort of explained it decently on The Daily Show, which was the night after.
Really?
Well, he had just said your sources tend to open up more when you get more from sources when it's something like a book versus an article that's going to be in the paper the next couple days. And obviously there's certain ethics at play.
It's a weird thing, isn't it? That's a weird thing, asking a source a question and saying, I won't put this in today's newspaper, I will put it in a book. Isn't that a weird way to do things?
Or if you present up front, you might present up front like we're writing a book. And then some sources in government. No, I'm just saying in terms of what you get out of the source. Apparently, I mean, well, anyway, they're fans of mine, so don't you disparage them one bit. But no, I mean, if you need to, you can. But they were fans of my work in during the pandemic, and Jonathan Martin came to see me perform in the DC area. Wow. And we hung out after. I gave him some impromptu Trump and Pence while we were having drinks, and we've been in touch, and they asked me, they invited me to the party, and I said, absolutely, that sounds cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
And it was cool because there were a lot of journalistic bigwigs.
Oh yeah? Who you got?
Well, I don't know if I should say it. I mean, a lot of times, I don't know if I guess, I don't know to what degree I should. I mean, it's not like a secret thing.
Was John Avlon there?
He was not. Oh, and this is your reality check. But he once retweeted me during the pandemic, and I didn't tag him in it, but he caught it because him and his wife, Margaret Hoover, they have their Zoom setup was very pastor and pastor's wife kind of looking. Like she's very, like, it was just the way they have it set up, the camera angle. And I think I wrote that. I said, they look like, and then he liked it on Twitter. And I don't even think he knew we were connected. But the book party had some journalistic luminaries, but I was like the most well-known person who was not a journalist. And it turned out that, like a G-list entertainment celebrity among A-list journalism celebrities. And many of them had ordered cameos. They were fans. Like, it was very crazy.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
A guy
that's
who was a
fantastic.
bigwig on Jeb Bush's campaign, because the host came up to me, obviously somebody of means, and he said, we ordered a cameo for my friend who is such and such in Jeb Bush's campaign. He's like, do you remember that one? And I said, normally people come up to me and say, you did one for my sister's 40th birthday. And I'm like, I've probably done 80 of those. I don't remember. But when you do one for a Jeb Bush campaign person, you remember that. And it was very funny. They were like throwing back my quotes from the cameo. So it was a nice ego boost. And then I got to Penn Station, and a homeless man asked me, if I don't play basketball, why am I so fucking tall? And I said, I'm brought back down to earth. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I've had that happen so many times. Every time something amazing happens in my career, I think that's just part of our ego default. The next day or the next hour after the thing is over, you're kind of humbled in a way, and you're like, I'm not special. I'm not that. I think one of my biggest ones was when I was on the season finale of The Apprentice, and it aired 6 months after we taped it. And that night I was just famous. It was like 15 million people watched. And it's like 5 hours later, I was stretching out an old lady because I was still a personal trainer because I wasn't making enough money as a comedian.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a euphemism for your escort business.
If you would let me finish. Yes, I was stretching out an old lady that I had paid to make love to me.
Patreon. And also, I want to say something to your listeners. I said it on my podcast this past week too, and I know there's a few listeners of both shows, but Pete was very kind last week when I didn't appear on the show, and you had said that you had messed something up. I was supposed to be on the show, and the truth is, without getting into details, I was very upset with something in my career and was becoming unhinged is really the only way to describe it. I was extremely angry and volatile. And Pete gave me a quick and polite, a relatively polite lesson in perspective. And so I wanted to just let everybody know that was Pete took the blame. You have nothing, no idea what it was about, but that was actually on me why I wasn't on the show last week. And it wasn't.
You didn't have to say that.
Well,
sometimes
you're a good man, and anytime I get the chance to tell your audience something like that, I think it's important. You took the heat for it, and they probably suffered last week not having me, and they were like, "Well, this show sucks," and it was actually my fault that I couldn't be on making the show better.
Sometimes it's the guest's fault. Sometimes it's my fault, but I generally always blame it on me because, what are you going to do? Throw a guest who's coming on for free under the bus? Oh, this person.
For what?
Someone that's coming on the show without being paid.
Who's that? People do that?
I mean, a paid day out. You pay me. He's a subscriber. And now you can be a subscriber to his Patreon as well. You can support JL right now by going to patreon.com/ what is it?
JL Cauvin. But I call it JL Max Plus Prime. That's sort of the title of it. But it's just a patreon.com/ JL Cauvin. And a lot of good stuff. And it's very cheap. But it's a lot of good stuff. It's more kind of an experiment to see if I can get a little more engagement from the fans.
Well, it's going pretty well. You're definitely adding subscribers. I've seen it. And you can sign up now for $4 or $7 a month. But let me ask you before we got to wrap up, I want to get your take on, just real quick, do you have anything to say about the Chappelle being tackled or anything, comedians and violence? I mean, that was last week.
Yeah.
I talked.
It's not an epidemic, despite comedians always wanting to somehow be. Comedians have that in common with the Trump base. This desire to be all powerful and a victim simultaneously. Like, we defend free speech and should be worshipped at the altar of the Constitution. And also, we are under attack and nobody can help. Nobody can save us. I think Chappelle it's scary. I mean, all jokes aside, that's scary. There's no doubt about it. Like, that guy could have had a real gun. That guy could have stabbed him, he tackled him. But what if he had just run up and pretended to high five him and that unquestionably is very scary. It's also clearly very unlikely. It's a very unlikely. But my one thought about it was, I don't know who the person was. I haven't read any information about the person other than the picture where his arm is going the other direction. What if Dave Chappelle were, just hypothetically, were a white comic, Nick DiPaolo, let's say, and said, no, I don't mean that, but I'm somebody provocative, somebody conservative, somebody prone to maybe using some offensive language or having some right-wing talking points, and use the N-word on stage. And a black guy ran on stage and punched him, not killed him, not did it, but punched him. Hero. In other words, some people would be saying that's scary, but a lot of people would be sort of applauding the general sentiment. Hey, you punch Nazis, right? When Richard Spencer got punched, there wasn't a soul going, hey, man, that's not cool, because we sort of have a collective idea that those aren't good views. But if this person, and this is a hypothetical really, but had this person been a trans person, I don't know if they were, had this person been a trans person who was finding Dave's diminishment of their personhood offensive to a level of almost racial slur level and ran up and punched him, that person would still get their ass beat and be getting applauded. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that was the case, but that kind of ran through my mind, because that's really been the only target of Dave's comedy that has caused controversy. But without knowing that, it was terrible. It shouldn't have happened. So I think just the top line is unacceptable and scary. But then as I think about it more, I'm like, well, what if, I'm just curious, had this been a different set of circumstances, was this person just crazy, or did they have some sort of agenda, a political agenda with what they did? Neither is okay, but I just think it would be interesting to see how this would be treated if it was if this was some sort of politically motivated stunt.
Right.
If the comic were different, if the agenda were different, would it be a praised move of well, you say that, you're going to get hit?
I think it is an interesting hypothetical to look at. And I think the difference is, in a famous comedian case, if you did a special that went viral or a lot of people saw, somebody might come up to you later on the street or at the next show. It's more likely if it's me, you, or Nick DiPaolo, it's during the show, I say something that really pisses you off, and we've seen that, but it's really not common, and I'm not sure that that's increasing. General rule is it's embarrassing for that person, and if you pay, I did tweet this week. My dad took me to see George Carlin when I was 16 at the Syracuse Civic Center, and he started doing material about abortion, and people got up and left, and my dad's aghast at that. He's like, why would you pay for a performance and leave, even if you're offended? So not only are you offended, now you're going to attack somebody, and you paid. It's just a kind of a weird.
Also, George Carlin, it's also one of those things where you go, did you go because you're a big fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, or do you know any of his work? You don't have to agree, don't buy the tickets. It's Be an informed, you'd expect if somebody comes to see me and doesn't know what I'm about, that I understand. But George Carlin,
that's what I'm
fairly
saying.
known brand.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Did you not know what you're going to get? All right, let me ask you one more thing,
yes, sir.
Which is about these Trump rallies and about his current influence. The last couple of rallies, he's had two major gaffes where he just didn't know who he was talking about. This last one, it was Dr. Oz and the rain over the weekend, apparently, in a pouring, driving rain. And I think one of the speakers said something about it was God, it was liberal tears or something. I don't know. But
so in other words, God is liberal. What are they talking about?
I don't know what it was. I forget what it was, but it doesn't matter. Trump referred to Dr. Oz's wife is going to make a great first lady. Now he's running for Senate, not governor. And then, of course, it was Ohio the week before that where he combined the two Senate candidates, J.D. Vance,
J.D. Mandel,
and Josh Mandel. And he said J.D. Mandel. And I don't know. I actually don't make a big deal out of that. Trump's always been a little bit senile. He's an older man. So is Joe Biden. So are a lot of older people making speeches. Come on, I do it. But do you think there's anything different about him? And do you think his influence is waning or is it waxing? And does he wax?
I don't think he waxes. I think he would consider that weak and feminine.
What would it sound like if someone asked him, would you like to wax your taint?
Okay, excuse me. We don't do scalp taint, and it's a strong area between where I have powerful sex with melatonin and where I do strong number 2. And you don't wax that. God didn't give us... He put the hair there for a reason. Okay? It's called Christian. And if you wax it, you hate God. You hate God if you wax it, okay? So you don't wax it. You keep it very, you can trim it, okay? I'm issuing a Trump fatwa right now. You can trim it with respect. If you do it with respect, you can gently trim it. But you don't wax. That's for Brazilian whores and Ivanka.
So do you think, back to the question about his influence, what do you think?
I mean, he's picking like his safe spots. Like nobody talks as much about how he's having no impact in Georgia.
Right.
Dr. Oz will be an interesting test because a lot of people, what I find funny about Dr. Oz, if I may, your own quote unquote party, Mr. Big Republican, Dr. Mehmet Oz, the campaign against you intra-party is you can't be trusted because you might be like a Turkish Middle Eastern agent or have dual loyalties to the country. Wouldn't that give you pause to go, are these the people I want to represent if I do get elected senator? Is this what, but there's such an emptiness, a soullessness to the man to already make it this far as like some sort of fake hard line tool. But I would be like, oh, like if I ran as a Republican and then there all of a sudden, like if it became like a leading campaign against me that, my father was a voodoo witch doctor who had, sexually assaulted white women in New York. And that was like losing me points in the primary. I'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm stepping out, not because I think I'll lose, but because why the fuck would I want to win this?
Wait, what is that? What are you talking about? Is there a rumor about Oz?
People have been no. It's like a whisper campaign of like he has dual citizenship.
Dr. Oz would be the first Muslim to be elected to the U.S. Senate. He's a Muslim?
I guess.
Wow. I'm just seeing this. He's a
radical left. No, he's a strong. And what's funny is you'd think if you told the voters, oh, no, don't worry, he's not he's a conservative Muslim, that would almost make it worse.
Right. Yeah, no,
but he's conservative in his, views on American policy and probably somewhat liberal on his Islam.
I don't even know what conservative means anymore. It's like to win, they all think they have to line up. MAGA. Yeah, that explains it to me. Trumper, Trumpist, whatever, because conservative is not. No, it's people.
They've changed the definition. The definition as it was known is completely useless. Conservative, it means. They
they used to be conservatives who wanted to be able to sell their conservative bona fides credibility. They would say things like, I'm a staunch conservative. I'm a rock-ribbed conservative. Sometimes they'd say, I'm a Reagan conservative, but they'd say, I'm the most conservative. They don't use the C word as much. They say, like, even on their mailers, it's like Trump approved type, right?
I always
like,
liked Pence. I always liked, I'm a Christian, conservative, and Republican in that order. I always liked that line. Yeah. I think Trump has extraordinary influence on the party. It is, I mean, it's his. Like, he owns it. I hope that he owns, a landslide loss in 2024 and ruins everything for the Republican Party. But there's a lot of people. I mean, it is really unsettling how spineless the Republican Party is. It's like if you're a Republican, feels like the traditional Republican, but now that's what it is. It's like I'm a traditional Republican, which means I'm basically a never Trump Republican. But at some point, some of these people have to look at it and go, is it coming back? Like, do you really think there's going to have to be a split? And the truth is, what real Republicans should do, and I think there are plenty who are doing this, is like, you should ensure the loss of the Republican Party as long as Trump is its head. And I know they won't do this, but for Kevin McCarthy, and I think I've said this on your show before, but now it's becoming closer to reality, for Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell to take over on the next available election since January 6th. So having paid zero price, they will not miss a beat. They will be back in power at the first opportunity the calendar provided. A real anti-Trump conservative should, a Murkowski, a Romney, a Kinzinger, even though I know he's leaving, register as an independent, vote your 93% Republican record, caucus with the Democrats. And I know they won't, but that's the penalty, because then when Mitch McConnell and his turtle face is celebrating like, I'm a Senate leader, all of a sudden you have like 3 senators go, actually, we're going to be caucusing with the Democrats. We're still going to vote with you, but we don't think you should have the reins of power just yet. That's the only way to do it. And once again, that means you're relying on... That's interesting. You're relying on Republicans to take extraordinary steps. And I'm one of those people who admires might be a strong word, but Mitt Romney, history will view him well, because on the big ticket items, his name will stand out. Twice voted to remove Trump, but this would be another thing. Like if it's a 51-49 Senate, hey, Romney, you're 73 and a billionaire. Why don't you just do this last thing? If you genuinely think Trump is a threat, if you genuinely think that, then this is sort of a nuclear option where you're basically saying, yeah, like I'm doing this because I don't think Mitch McConnell, or in the case of the House, even way worse, Kevin McCarthy, these people are not holding, they have not and will not hold Trump accountable, and they may grease the path for him to come back or overturn an election loss. That's what's at stake, is that if McConnell and McCarthy are in charge in 2024, you have to look at that and say, Kevin McCarthy is going to do everything he can legally and possibly extra legally to get Trump the win. If that's at stake and that concerned you, then switching party affiliation with the only goal of not giving control of power to the Republican Party, you can still vote against Joe Biden's bills 90% of the time and do the exact same thing. You just won't let them control it and be in position to control it in 2024. I don't know who to talk to about that. And that would be that would be an act in this political climate of extraordinary political courage. Well, I don't think you need to. I think they know that's an option, and I think that it's not going to happen. But I love the idea of it. The other thing that's interesting that probably won't happen, it's fascinating, is Trump could be Speaker of the House. They could just appoint him. Anybody can be. So, yeah. I mean, you could appoint Putin. So
which they might.
Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House, and we respect her breasts. Okay, we don't like her policies, but she's actually got a pretty good rec for somebody who's like 113 years old. But now We have an even bigger boob running the house, and his name is Trump.
Exactly. Well, it's possible. It is. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go, but I do want to say I'm looking forward to seeing you this weekend, this Saturday night at the Triad in New York City in the Upper West Side. I will be opening for you. So if anybody wants to come,
get those tickets. There's still a few tickets left. So
we're doing it
put
again.
My mind at ease and let's sell it out. And and obviously the Patreon. So thank you.
Of course, buddy.
For having me on.
Always. I will talk to you. I will see you this weekend. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And there he goes, JL Cauvin. Go support him on Patreon now and go to jlcauvin.com to find out more about his podcasts. Follow him on Twitter at JL Cauvin. Let him know you heard him here on the show. Again, Juliet Jeske, and thank you for joining me, to her, of course, and to Pete Coe for the opening, the jingle, the music every day by John Carroll, and all of you for supporting this podcast with a paid subscription. Go to standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/Pete Dominic to support this daily podcast. Tell your friends, spread the word, and give it a review. And I will talk to you tomorrow again right here on Stand Up. Be the change you want to see. Love you. Bye-bye.
See the forest full of burning trees. You got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long. You got the creaky knees. You got to stand up. Stand up. I think your driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.